Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 304. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. Today, I'm going to talk about how to prioritize when you can't do it all. Now, I'm aware that I'm a little bit privileged in terms of time management and prioritizing things, mainly because I don't have children. And I know that is a massive investment of time that most people have, and I do not. So I'm going to try to take that into consideration in today's episode, but I think I'm just not clear on how much of a big time investment that is. So I will try to make this useful for everyone, and I think I will because I'm going to be giving you lots of things to consider when prioritizing and choosing which tasks and activities to do, and also questions to ask yourself. And I think those things are relevant no matter whether or not you have children. However, I recognize if you do have kids, will have much less leeway in terms of what to do and when. So, how to prioritize when you can't do it all? Why is this a topic? I think time management is something that's really, really important. It's a topic that I love. It's a topic that I love talking about. It's a topic that I love handling in my life. And I really like having my time organized, and I really like being mindful with what I choose to do, when I choose to do it, how I choose to do it, where I choose to put it in my calendar in terms of times, days, weeks, months, whatever. And it's something that's become increasingly important with the launch of my recent book, If Trees Could Talk, Life Lessons from the Wisdom of the Woods, because I had a lot to do with that book launch. I set myself a fairly ambitious deadline for it, for releasing the book. And I had a lot to do, not only in the days and weeks running up to the launch, but also the week of launch, the weeks after launch. And I think I handled it really well. I'm very happy with how I did it. I was tired, and I've had to spend the last couple of weekends having really quiet, lazy weekends at home rather than going out for a walk or doing something because I feel like I needed some recovery time. But I don't think I was very burnt out. I don't think I was burnt out. I think I was tired. I was doing a lot, but I think I handled it really well. And I think that's because I was very clear in how I prioritize things. So if you've listened to this podcast before, you probably know that I use Google Calendar to manage my life. So I'm a very visual person. So whether you use Google Calendar or another calendar or a printed calendar or a bullet journal or whatever thing you use to manage your life and to manage your time, you need to have some tool. Whether that's a digital tool, an analog tool, whatever it is, find what works for you. If you don't have something already, play around with different things. I really like Google Calendar or another online calendar because it allows me to drag and drop things because my weeks never go the way I plan them. It also makes it easy to schedule recurring tasks and recurring time blocks. And I find it really, really easy to use. So again, whether you're using Google Calendar or something else, you need some kind of tool to manage your time and organize the things that you do in your life. If you don't, I don't know how you're going to manage your life. I think this is a really important thing because, if you're setting goals, if you've got a vision for yourself, whether you're self-employed or not, I think it's really, really important to be mindful with how we're spending our time. So even if you're not self-employed and you've got a job and you go to your job every day from 9 to 5 and you commute, I think the times that are outside of your fixed schedule of work you need to be mindful of how you spend that time so that you can have the most fulfilling life. Because if you just fall into the habit of doing stuff, it's really easy to fall into the trap of putting out fires and doing urgent stuff that's maybe not important, and also not scheduling time for yourself and scheduling time for self-care and not scheduling time for the things that are really important for you, be that hobbies or exercise or whatever. So if you don't have a system, get a system and play around with stuff to see what works for you, because there's no one system or schedule that works for everyone. So I realize that I've just launched straight into this episode without telling you what you're going to learn. So before I go on, I really want to talk about this. What are you going to learn today? I'm going to talk about how to organize your life using Google Calendar or another system. How to figure out what your non-negotiable tasks or activities are. Also going to talk about how to organize your regular tasks and recurring events, how to break bigger goals into specific tasks and activities so you can time block them. How to design your ideal week and see how that compares to reality so you can see if you need to make some shifts. What to do if you have a scheduling conflict. If you've got two things happening on the same time or date, how do you choose which one? How do you decide what to do and which task or activity is the priority? I also include questions to ask yourself so that you can easily make decisions and know what your priorities are. Finally, I'm going to include some examples of recent things that I've had to rearrange or I've decided to rearrange, and why, so that you can see how I do this and apply this to yourself. Before I get into the main part of the podcast episode, though, I want to also direct you to my survey. If you go to hollyworton.com/survey, I would love for you to answer a few questions so that I can make this podcast and other things that I create better for you. Just 7 quick questions, and none of them are obligatory. So you can choose to answer 1, 2, 3, or all. And it should only take about 5 minutes most, assuming you fill out all questions. So that's hollyworton.com/survey. Now back to time blocking, Google Calendar, time management, because I love this stuff. So first step is find a system or take the system you've already got and figure out what your non-negotiables are and time block them first. So meals. Now I do intermittent fasting, so I just eat 1 meal a day. So my meal is dinner. But back when I ate 3 meals a day like a normal human being, I had breakfast and I had lunch blocked out in my calendar because I found, especially with lunch, that I would get really focused on my work and really focused on the stuff that I was doing, and I would forget to eat. Then time would go on and I just wasn't focused because my stomach was growling and it'd be in the middle of another thing or about to come up across a call or a scheduled client session or something in my calendar where I didn't have time to bump that and eat. So blocking out meals is very important. Or meal. Kids, if you've got kids, you know what time you have to take your kids to school, pick them up from school, do other stuff with your kids, feed your kids. Block that out in your calendar. And when you're blocking stuff out, use different colors for different things. So I have different colors for work stuff. I have different colors for creative stuff. I have different colors for meals. I exercise, all that kind of stuff, self-care, morning routine. I have different colors for different things. And that helps me see how I'm planning my day. How much of the stuff in my schedule is personal stuff? How much of it is work stuff? How much of it is creative stuff? And it helps me to see my week at a glance, how I've planned things, and how I need to adjust accordingly to make sure that I have a balanced week in terms of getting my needs met with work, creativity, personal, that kind of stuff. So another thing that I consider to be non-negotiable is self-care, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we're going to burn out. And you may or may not be sick of the oxygen mask analogy, but if you don't take care of yourself first, i.e. putting your oxygen mask on first before your kids or family members, you're not going to be able to help them. So take care of yourself. So whether that's half an hour of reading, a bath, a morning routine, meditation, mindfulness, whatever that is, figure out how often you want or need to do that and how often you can do that and how much time you can spend doing that, and block that out into your calendar. I have a very extensive morning routine every morning, which sometimes doesn't happen, but usually every morning. And part of that actually a great deal of that is self-care stuff, like my druid ceremony, my shamanic journeys, healing time, mindset work, that kind of thing, and reading. So block out the time that you can and make sure it's in your calendar. Now, sometimes I have to drag and drop that. Sometimes other high priority stuff happens and I can't do it, but it's in the calendar, and it's in the calendar in a color that indicates that it's personal time. Next, add regular tasks and recurring events. And again, this is easiest if you're using an online calendar, because then you can create a recurring event. You don't have to add it manually every time. So exercise. Looking at my calendar, I have my kickboxing classes, both the group classes and my private one-to-one class that I do in my calendar every week. I also have other stuff that I may need to do that's fitness related. So I've got my kickboxing grading coming up at the end of June. So that means I need to do stuff to prepare for it. I need to run. I need to get into running shape again. I need to practice my line work. I need to do some kettlebells to strengthen parts of my body that had previously been causing me problems with my hip. So I need to do some stuff to make sure that my running doesn't mess up my hip. I need to practice other things that are part of the grading. So I have time blocked into my calendar because my grading is an important goal of mine and I want to make sure I pass. So I block the stuff I need to do to make that happen. Other regular tasks and recurring events, of course, as I mentioned earlier, stuff related to kids, stuff related to work. So if you have a job, block that out in your calendar. Not just the work itself, but the time that it takes to get to work and to get home from work. If you work from home or if you're self-employed, block out email stuff, block out creative stuff. I've got time every couple of weeks to record a podcast episode. I also block out stuff that I need to be home for, like my cleaner. So we have a cleaner that comes once a week and cleans our home for a couple of hours, 2.5 hours. And I have that blocked in my calendar because one of us needs to be home, either my husband or me. So I always have that blocked out in gray because that's not something that I'm actively doing, but it's something that I need to keep in mind when I'm planning other stuff. And I also block out other stuff related to my husband in gray. It's kind of a light gray. And it's just stuff that I need to be aware that he's doing, either because I need to be home for it or he's away on holiday on his own. And I need to make sure that I have that in my calendar in case I block some time away and I need to hire a cat sitter to take care of the cats, that kind of thing. So I have a lot of stuff that's not necessarily my stuff, but that's other people's stuff that I put in a light gray, because I need to take it into consideration when I'm planning my own stuff. So think about stuff like that for you that you need to add. Then I have my goals. So know what your goals are in life. So looking at personal goals, professional goals. So I have books that I write on a regular basis. I set a deadline for myself. I block out time on my calendar for writing. I block out time on my calendar for reviewing and editing, for launching, promoting, marketing, all the stuff I need to do to not only write my book or create my thing, but get it out there into the world and market it. So break each goal down to a specific task. So like I said, kickboxing. Every few months I have a grading and I have things that I need to do to make sure that I pass my grading. And those things are going to class, running, practicing my line work, doing my kettlebells. All that stuff needs to be done to make sure that I achieve my goal, which happens the last week in June. So break down your goals into specific tasks. It's very kind of nebulous to say, pass my next kickboxing grading. What do I need to do to make that happen? Publish my next book. What do I need to do to make that happen? Do I need to research? One of the books that I'm going to be working on this year is a second edition of my very first walking book, Alone on the South Downs Way. I'm going to be walking the trail again. So that's the research part of it. Then I need to write. Then I need to edit. Then I need to do all the things that are related to a book. So that's a very important part of getting my goals achieved. I need to do specific tasks. So it's really important to break down these goals into specific tasks and block them into your calendar. This is also especially important. Well, it's especially important for two reasons. So if you've got an external deadline, like this project is due by this date, or I don't get to choose when my summer course grading is, it's set in calendar for everyone that goes to my school. So that's an external deadline. So I need to kind of plan in advance up to that date. it's also important if you're setting your own deadline. So like with my recent book launch, I set my own deadline for when I was going to launch the book. It was a fairly ambitious deadline, which meant that I really had to push myself to achieve it. But I still needed to break my goal down into specific tasks and block them into my calendar. So if you are setting your own deadlines and you work back to time block, sometimes you might see, oh, I don't have time to do all the things I need to do to achieve my goal by the deadline. So either you need to move stuff around or reevaluate your deadline and maybe bump it into the future, X amount of weeks or months. I originally wanted to have my tree book done by December of last year. That was totally unreasonable. I needed until April of this year to do it. There was so much that happened between December and April that I couldn't have done by December. So be reasonable with your goals and your deadlines, especially when you're making your own deadlines. And if you're working to an external deadline that someone else has set for you, be sure that you can do the stuff you need to do to achieve that goal by that deadline. So if, say, I had a ton of stuff going on and I couldn't get the stuff, do my running, get ready for my kickboxing grading in the summer course, I could just skip the summer course and grade on the winter course. It happens twice a year, so I need to choose. Do I really want to do this now, or do I have other stuff that's more important that I would have to push back? For me, that's one of my really important things. It really helps me to push myself and to get better by doing the gradings every time they come around. So that's been every 6 months for the advanced grades. Again, that's something that's really specific for me, but I'm sure that will give you ideas for what kinds of things are similar in your life, whether you have self-imposed deadlines or externally imposed deadlines. So that wraps up breaking your goals into specific tasks. What do you actually need to do to achieve your goals? Next, and I think this is really important, is to design your ideal week and see how that compares to reality. So several months ago, I took a week in the future, a random week in Google Calendar, and I just took that week and I thought, what do I want my week to look like? And so I rearranged and I actually blocked out a bunch of stuff in that one week, which I ended up later deleting because it wasn't reality. It was my ideal week. You could do this on paper. You could do this in your online thing. But map out your ideal week. How do you ideally want to spend your time? And if you're working for someone else, you're going to have less flexibility than if you're working for yourself. But still, what does your ideal week look like? How much time do you want to be spending on social life, on hobbies, on your career or business, on creativity, self-expression, health, well-being, fitness, self-care, spiritual and personal growth? Like, how much time do you want to be devoting to each of these things in your ideal week? Map that out. So I mapped it out. I took a screenshot of it so that I had it and then deleted all the time blocks because it wasn't an actual week in my life. And then I compared that to my reality. I compared that to a typical week and I adjusted accordingly. So where do you want to be spending more time? Where could you spend less time? How can you adjust your current week to match your ideal week? That's really, really important, is to know how you want to spend your time, because that will help you be mindful of how you plan this week and your upcoming weeks. So, how do you decide what to do and what's the priority? Start out by knowing what your top goals are in life. And I've already mentioned this, but set goals if you don't already, and know what your top goals are. So prioritize your goals so that you know which ones are important. Write them down somewhere or have them in a system, drag and drop them, renumber them. Make sure you know what your most important goals are in life. And then know what's important to you. So when I was mapping this out for the show notes, or for my bullet points for talking to this, I was looking at an old Wheel of Life thing from my old coaching days. And do you know what? I might include that here as a download. I'll include that in the show notes. So I've just made a note for myself. So the Wheel of Life is, there's this kind of pie chart with like different categories in life. And in typical life coaching activity, you would rank each of those areas on a scale of 1 to 10. So like my social life, how good is it on a scale of 1 to 10? Is it a 7? Is it an 8? What is it? Is it a 2? So you can see how you're doing in different areas of your life and where you might want to improve. I find it really useful. That's a really kind of basic life coaching tool that I find really, really useful. So look at those areas. You can either rank your life using the Wheel of Life, or you can just look at the categories and see what's important to you. So I'm going to read them out loud to you now. So social life or friends, family, fitness, outdoors, nature, self-care or me time, spiritual and personal growth, hobbies, career, business, health, well-being, creativity, self-expression. Look at those different areas, and I'm going to put them in the show notes so you don't have to go back and listen to them, and rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 of what's most important to you. Because I'm sure they're all important, but not everything has equal importance. And you're going to need to know what's most important to you when you're planning out your time and deciding what are your priorities in life and time management. It also really helps to know your values. And as I was putting these bullet points together, I was realizing I really feel drawn to go back to these old kind of life coaching blog posts that I wrote back in 2011, talking about values and priorities. And I really want to revisit those and maybe do some podcast episodes on those, because I think it's really important stuff that a lot of people don't think about when planning their lives or when taking action or when doing stuff. So know what your values are, what's important to you. One of my most important values is freedom. Freedom is really important to me. There have been times in my life when I felt a total lack of freedom, when I felt really stuck and frustrated, like I didn't have options in life, and that I was absolutely miserable. So, do you know what? I'm going to put a values list in the show notes, and you can figure out what your values are if you don't know what they are. I think it's really, really important to know that. So know what your values are, because that's also going to help you decide what are your priorities in life. Next, when you're planning your calendar or your schedule, leave open slots for breathing space. This is super, super important. And I don't always do that. So this is a do as I say, not as I do suggestion. So leaving open slots for breathing space allows you time and space to allow for changes, to allow for unexpected things, and rest time. You can also block out rest time in your calendar. So this is something that I've recently started doing. If I have a big event that I know will leave me just flat out exhausted afterwards, I block out time to recover in my calendar. So there is, for example, an event that I usually kind of help out with the planning and I attend every October. So leading up to this event in October is really, really stressful. I have a lot of stuff I have to do. I need to make sure they're done by that really hard deadline. I need to organize, there's people involved. And then I go to the event, which I love, but it's also really not emotionally draining, but like energetically draining for me. And I need to recover afterwards. So in previous years, I've not been good at blocking out a day in my calendar for the day after this event. This year I have, because I know I'm going to have to sleep in, just allow myself sleeping in time. I'm going to have to just give myself time and space to rest. Otherwise, it's going to mess up the rest of my week and possibly the following week. I have found that if I don't give myself rest time after stuff like this, it messes up my productivity for the following days and week. So that's really, really important for me. I'm an introvert, so I know that I need to manage my energy very well and very mindfully. So that's really important. So what do you do if you have a scheduling conflict? Two things are happening on the same date or time, and you don't know how to choose. You don't know what to do. Here are some questions to ask yourself, and I'm going to include these questions in the show notes. So first of all, how does this activity or task take you one step closer to achieving your top goals? Does it help you achieve your goals, or is this just a thing that would be nice to do? Which of these two activities or tasks will be more important in helping you achieve your goals? Next, just ask yourself, which activity is more important, and listen to your gut response. You might have a very clear response from just that, even if it's not the response that you may want. Listen to your gut. Next, ask yourself, can you do one of these activities or tasks at another time or date? Or could you do it later in the year? So I just today booked in first aid course, so an outdoor first aid course, which is 2 days. I think it's like 8 hours a day over 2 days. It's on a weekend. And it's something that I did 3 years ago, and it expires every 3 years. So I need to do it this year. Even though I'm not doing guided walks anymore, I don't want to let this expire. I want to have it up to date. It's important for me. It's important for people that I go outdoors with, whether or not I'm guiding groups. So it's important for me to do this year. So it's not something I can put off to another year. I want to make it as easy for myself as possible by doing it in my local town. So the school that I did my outdoor first aid class with, they're based up in Manchester. But they do courses all over the country. But they only do a course in my area a couple times a year. So I think the dates were June, or I think it was like November or something. And it's outdoors first aid. So I don't want to be outdoors in the cold and the wet trying to learn or refresh my memory on stuff. I want to be in the summer, where it may rain or it may not rain, but it's more likely to be good weather in June than it is in November. So it was kind of like either do it now in June or be cold in November, and doing it next year was not an option for me. So I wanted to have a workcation weekend that weekend, but I ended up bumping the workation because I don't have many options for this course. So it was like, do it now or spend a bunch of time doing research to see if another first aid school does it in my town. I didn't find a lot of other things, so I didn't want to waste time on doing more research. So it was easier for me to decide the workation can be done any weekend or even during the week. So bump the workation and do the first aid in June when I can do it. Also, the workation was not as important because I'm not clear on what my next book is. I have some ideas, but it's not urgent, so that could easily be bumped to later in the month. So that's an example of how I dealt with that. I could have done it at a later time or date. I could have done it later in the year, but I didn't want to because doing it in nice weather was more important to me than waiting until November. Next. Can one of the activities be arranged without overcomplicating things or inconveniencing someone else? So if someone else is involved in this activity, I try not to rearrange because I don't like messing around with other people's schedules. So that's a priority for me. I will rearrange with other people if the other thing is so important and I can't do it at any other time, but I'm really, really mindful of not messing around with other people if I don't have to. So if other people are involved, I'm probably not going to move that task. So can one of the activities be arranged without overcomplicating things? I recently rearranged another workation to see some friends. So we have these friends that are friends from years ago, way back in Argentina, and they live very near us now. Well, not very near us, but nearish us. But we only see them maybe 3 times a year. And we haven't seen them since Christmas. So I would really like to see them. And seeing them involves an hour's drive there, hour's drive back, an extended lunch or dinner. So it's kind of a full day or 3/4 of a day activity. And it's on the weekend because that's when we can see them or they can see us. So it was like, do I do this workation now? Do I do it later? When can I see them? And I actually went through my calendar and I looked at all the weekend days that I could see them. And there were only a couple of weekends in the next 3 months that I could see them. So I thought, bump the workation and see them when I can. And that was my priority because it's hard to arrange things sometimes with other people. So sometimes I will bump something else of mine to prioritize something that involves another human being because it's just easier for me to be flexible with stuff with like a workation that I don't, I can do it whenever. Next question. Do you have the time or money to do this right now, or should you rearrange it for a later date? So looking at your budget, something like a outdoor first aid class is not cheap. It was just under 150 pounds. So does that fit into my budget this month? Or should I bump it to a later date when I could fit it more easily into my budget? That goes for any kind of thing that costs money. A workation is just an expense, but it is an expense because I'm going outside of my house, staying in a hotel. So think about your budget and do you have the money to do this right now? And the same goes for time. Do you have the time to do this thing right now, or could you arrange for it at a later date? I am constantly shifting things in my calendar to a later date to make sure that I am not overstressed with my activities. Next question, do you absolutely need to do this activity now? For example, because there's a deadline, or could you do it at a later time or date? So going back to my first aid thing, my first aid certificate expires in September because that's when I did it 3 years ago. So ideally, I would like to do it before September, but I could have done it in November because, again, I'm not guiding people on walks at this time, so I don't really have the obligation of keeping my first aid up to date. It's more like nice to have. Next, do you absolutely need to do this task or activity yourself, or can you outsource it? So years ago, we outsourced our housekeeping, house cleaning, because both of us hate doing it. I kept putting it off until the house was just disgusting and I was embarrassed to have anyone over. Probably wasn't as bad as you might be envisioning, but I have high standards for cleanliness. Based on how I was raised, my parents are very, very, very clean, so I have high expectations for my own house's cleanliness. And it's hard to keep the house clean. We don't have kids, but we do have 2 cats, and we both work from home. So our house probably gets kind of untidy and a bit more dirty than the average person who works outside of the house 5 days a week. So anyway, we have outsourced to a cleaner. We've done that for a few years now because I just don't want to invest my time in that. She's very efficient. She cleans the house in 2.5 hours. We have a very small house. It would probably take me a lot longer to do that. And worse, I would probably just put it off and put it off and put it off and never do it because that's how it used to be before we had a cleaner. The house was nasty. So, can you outsource it? If you can afford to outsource it, do it. The cleaning, we absolutely can fit it into our budget. I would rather skimp on other things if I needed to and have a cleaner because it's very important for me to not clean my house because I really, really don't like it. Don't do it. Next, do you absolutely need to do this task or activity now, or is it just nice to do? So, like with the first aid, it's nice to do. I don't need to do it. With my kickboxing grading, it's nice to do, but I don't need to do it. But moving through the grades in my kickboxing is really important to me because my kickboxing is important to me. I love the belt system. It really gives me something to strive towards, and it makes me practice the stuff I need to practice to get better. If I didn't have that kind of exam every once in a while, I would probably be a lot more lax about improving. So it's important for me to do. But it's not a need to do. It's a nice to do. And again, as I'd said, can you bump it to a later date or time on your calendar? I could bump my grading to the winter course and not the summer course. But it fits into my calendar for the summer, and I've managed to arrange the rest of my schedule around that. Is there another time, date, location you could do this? So again, going back to my outdoor first aid, I could have done the course somewhere else, but it would have involved traveling. It would have taken more time out of my schedule, whereas it's in the town that I live in. I can just drive up there in the morning and drive back in the evening. I don't need to book a hotel. I can just sleep at home, and it's very, very easy. Other things that I've had to book around or rearrange. I just realized about a month ago that in order to get my black belt, which doesn't come up until next year, I need to do some kind of competition. And I've never done that for a variety of reasons, mostly because I'm not interested in competing, but now it's a need to do, and it's something I need to do before the summer course next year, which is going to be June or July. There are a number of ways I can do this. There are lots of competitions. The easiest way to sign up for a competition is in one of the events that my school plans with the other sister schools in the area. So I originally thought I couldn't do that because I had things in the calendar for all of the 3 dates in the year that they have these events. But I was just looking at my calendar this year and I thought, you know what? The last date in November I could do. There's this workshop that I've been wanting to do it for a while. It coincides in the same date as this competition. What should I do? And I thought, you know what? That workshop is something that's offered every year, at least once or twice a year. I don't need to do it now. I don't need to do it this year. But I do need to do a kickboxing competition before June or July of next year. So why not just get that out of the way, bump this workshop until next year, and plan to do the kickboxing thing in November. So that was another example of how I rearranged one thing that I didn't really need to do something that I do need to do by a certain date. Yes, I could wait until next year to do some kind of competition, but I don't want to do just a general competition with other people that are used to competing all the time because I don't want to get injured, and people that compete tend to be very focused and intense, more intense than I am. So I want to do my first and only competition in a fairly safe environment. What's next? Oh, so I'm on my plant spirit initiation apprenticeship this year, and that's one weekend every month for 9 months this year. And that's a non-negotiable because there are 9 months, 9 weekends to this apprenticeship. And there have been other things that I have had to rearrange based on those weekends, which for me are non-negotiable because I've invested in this program. This is what I want to do. So other things have had to take a lower priority based on the 9 non-negotiable weekends for this apprenticeship. Another thing, there was another event that I had in my calendar for July. A friend of mine will be coming to the country and I really want to meet up with her that weekend. Do I want to see my friend who I only see in real life a couple times a year? Or do I want to do this thing which really isn't that important? I've just decided to cancel the other thing and meet up with my friend. So now that's something I have to book in my calendar, but that's another thing that I've just decided today. So I go through my calendar on a regular basis and I just kind of look at what the upcoming weeks look like. What do the weekends look like? I make sure I'm not overscheduling myself because I really don't like being overbooked. I don't like being busy. I really need to have weekends like the last couple of weekends on my schedule where I did nothing but sit around at home and go on a very light walk and go on a run and just kind of chill. I need those times in my calendar. Otherwise, I go a little crazy and I get really burnt out. So go through your calendar on a regular basis and make sure you're not overbooking yourself. Next question to ask yourself, does this activity spark joy? If you don't know what I'm talking about, read The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I think that's the book. If you've heard of KonMari, that's the question that Marie Kondo asks or tells you to ask yourself when decluttering stuff. But it's a really good question to ask. Does this activity or this task spark joy? If it doesn't, do you really need to do it? Can you get someone to help you with it or do it for you? So examples, housekeeping. I do not like cleaning my house. I've already said I hired someone. It's made my life so much happier. Bookkeeping for my business. I hated it. Oh God, I hated it so much. I hired a bookkeeper last year. Someone recommended to me by my accountant. She works with my accountant. So it's great because they liaise, they do their stuff. And if they have any questions, they ask me. But yeah, I outsource it. I hated bookkeeping. So if you really dislike something, see if you can get help or if you can outsource it to someone else. Next, I'm sure you've seen the quadrant where it's like the important urgent quadrant. So if you haven't, I will link to that in the show notes. But ask yourself, is the activity or task urgent and important? Urgent but not important. Important but not urgent. Not urgent and not important. Block it out into one of those quadrants and see, again, I'm very visual. So that might help you see how different tasks compare to each other. Obviously, if it's urgent and important, that's the stuff that you need to be doing first. And if it's not urgent, not important, that's the least important stuff. But that can be a really good visual. Finally, one thing that I've been not as good at as I would like is implementing a one-touch email system. I have this week found a system that I think is going to fix this for me forever. And I think this is something that's going to help me with prioritizing, and I think it might help you with prioritizing. So that's why I'm sharing it here. So I use a tool called Boomerang for Gmail. I think it's a plugin or what the heck is it called? Chrome. It's a Chrome plugin or whatever the heck they're called. And it helps you boomerang your email. So what it helps you do is it helps you to send an email at a later date. It helps you boomerang an email out of your inbox and come back at a later date. And that's one of the main ways that I use it. So with my new one-touch email system, the question I have asked myself, and I've got it on a note so that I can remember to do it. So it says email, deal with it now or boomerang for another day. So what I do is I go through my inbox from start to finish, so most recent to oldest. You could do it the other way around, whatever. I just start at the top and work my way down. I absolutely have to do something with it when I see it. So I know I have X amount of time for dealing with emails and the related tasks every day. So let's say this afternoon, I've got an hour. So what can I do in an hour? Probably not everything. So go through the list one by one. This email, X. Am I going to do it now? Am I going to respond to it now? Or do I need more time? Or is it a low priority email? If it's a low priority, or if I don't have the time, boomerang it to tomorrow. If I'm going to deal with it now, deal with it now. Then move on to the next one. So I feel like I've worked with Boomerang for a long time, and I feel like it's been really helpful with prioritizing. So that's why I'm sharing it with you. So again, if I know I have a certain amount of time to respond to my emails, what I'll often do is I'll often go through my inbox and boomerang all the emails that I know are low priority. I boomerang them for tomorrow or a later date, or when I know I'll have time to deal with them. Also, another way I deal with tasks is if I notice I've been boomeranging a particular email or task over and over and over and over, and it's been kind of like leaving my inbox and coming back and leaving and coming back for a long time or several times, that to me is a key that it's really low priority. Because if I haven't done it by now and life has gone on, I either outsource it or just delete it, and I don't deal with it because it's so low priority, it doesn't matter. So prioritizing your emails and learning how to prioritize your emails might help you prioritizing other aspects of your life. That's why I'm sharing that with you. I'm also aware of how long this episode is, so I want to wrap it up. I hope you have found this interesting and useful. I'm going to be going through and adding a lot of resources to the show notes. So I'm going to be adding that list of questions. I'm going to be adding the wheel of life, the list of values, the quadrant thingy, and I hope this stuff will help you prioritize your life and be more mindful about how you spend your time, because we can't do it all. So make sure that you do the most important things. Make sure you do the things that will make your life more joyful and fulfilling, because if we don't mindfully plan our calendars and manage our time and manage our lives, it's so easy to get into a rut of doing the same crap all the time. It's so easy to let the things that are most joyful slip because we think maybe they're not as important as the urgent stuff. So I really think this is an important part of living a joyful life, of being happy in life. Happiness, I don't think happens by accident. I think we need to know what makes us happy and organize our life accordingly. Doing the things that we want to do, doing the things that we love, doing the things that bring us joy. Those things don't happen unless we make them happen. So that's all for now. Next week, I think, will be an episode with Joanna Hennon. If not, it might be an episode with Cara Wilde. I don't know. I need to reorganize and look at my schedule because I've got another episode coming up with Cara, which we will be recording next week, which I'm super excited about. So I would love for you to join me on Patreon. If you get value from this podcast, please head over to Patreon and support me there to make sure that I can prioritize this podcast in my week. If you head over to patreon.com/Holly Worton, that's patreon.com/Holly Worton. You can join me there. Membership starts at just $1 a month, and you get exclusive access to stuff that I don't share anywhere else, including a monthly Q&A and done-for-you mindset and energy work. So please drop me a line. Let me know what you thought about this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollyworton.com and get in touch there, or on social networks. Also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those places. You can find me there and let me know what you thought and what you would like me to talk about in the future. I love getting suggestions for topics from listeners. Those are my favorite ones to do. And let me know what you want me to talk about. And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe if you haven't already. I am on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all over the place. It will make it much easier for you to get me in your podcasting app so you can listen to me every week. So that's all for now. Remember to visit hollyworton.com/304 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollyworton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.